All right, so you're thinking about a career working with animals.
Hmm.
Well, get ready to go beyond those cute Instagram posts because today's deep dive is all about what it really takes to be an animal handler.
And we've got the inside scoop with RoleCatcher's Animal Handler, the complete career guide. Trust me, this is way more than just puppy cuddles.
I bet. So where do we even start with a deep dive like this? What's the first thing someone should know?
Well, the guide makes it clear right off the bat that animal handler isn't just one job title. It's actually this whole spectrum of roles with increasing responsibility as you move up.
Okay, that makes sense. You're
Yeah.
not just thrown into the lion's den right away.
Exactly. They break it down really well, starting with the entry-level position, animal care assistant. Think of it as like the foundation.
Okay, so you're just starting out eager to work with animals. What does that actually look like day to day?
Get ready to roll up your sleeves. We're talking cleaning enclosures, feeding, making sure those water bowls are full, and of course, keeping a close eye on the animals for any sign that something's off.
So it's all the not so glamorous stuff you got to master before you're like whispering to wolves.
Exactly. But here's the thing that surprised me. Rollcatcher has this quote from an experienced handler who said those early days actually taught them more about animal behavior than any textbook could. It's all about observing those subtle cues. That's how you truly learn.
Oh, totally. Like I can read a million articles about canine body language, but actually seeing a dog tense up right before a bark, that's real learning.
And that leads perfectly into the next stage, animal caretaker. Now you're stepping up to things like handling medications, maybe even assisting with some vet procedures. Things definitely get more hands-on.
Whoa, hold on. They're trusted with meds at that
Yeah.
level. I'm picturing someone freaking out because a chihuahua drooled on them during pill time.
Haha. Well, the guide does mention there's a lot of training involved, but yeah, it shows how much responsibility you take on as you progress.
Okay, so you've cleaned up your share of messes. You've proven you can handle a syringe full of antibiotics. What's the next rung on this animal handler ladder?
All right, this is where things get really interesting. Now you've got your animal trainers. We're talking behavior specialists here, using things like positive reinforcement and really understanding animal psychology to shape their actions.
So are we talking like those dog whisperer types who can take a totally unruly pup and turn him into a well-behaved citizen?
That's definitely part of it. But RoleCatcher takes it a step further. They've got all these examples of trainers who are designing enrichment activities for the animals in their care.
Enrichment activities like, what, building a pillow fort for a poodle?
Uh-huh, not quite. Think of things that mimic an animal's natural instincts. It's about keeping them stimulated even in captivity.
Oh, that makes sense. A bored lion is probably a destructive lion.
Exactly. And get this, the guide has a whole section on how technology is even changing that aspect of the job. They're using virtual reality in animal training now.
Wait, are you serious? Are we talking strapping VR headsets onto monkeys? Because honestly, that's both hilarious and slightly terrifying to picture.
Not quite. It's more about creating these simulated environments. Like imagine a virtual jungle for a rescued orangutan. It helps them adjust without the limitations of the real world.
Okay, that's some next level stuff.
Yeah.
You'd have to be pretty tech savvy to handle all that.
It really shows how this career path isn't about just learning one thing and calling it good. You got to be ready to keep up with the times.
That's true with like every job these days, isn't it? But all this talk of tech and virtual reality makes me wonder, will robots replace animal handlers someday? Like, is this even a future-proof career?
Now that is the million-dollar question, and luckily RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from it.
All right, lay it on me. Robots or no robots?
One thing they really emphasize is that technology can enhance a lot of things, but it can't replace the human touch.
It's more of like a partnership than a complete takeover.
Exactly. They use the example of automated feeding systems, super efficient, right? But you still need a human to notice if an animal's eating habits change, which could be a sign of illness.
True, a robot isn't going to pick up on the fact that a usually ravenous pup is suddenly picking at their food.
Exactly. So yeah, technology might change how we do certain tasks, but those core skills of observation, empathy, and truly understanding animal behavior, those are irreplaceable.
So robots aren't replacing anyone yet. But that doesn't mean it's all sunshine and tail wags. The guide doesn't exactly sugarcoat the emotional demands of this job, does it?
Definitely not. In fact, there's a whole section dedicated to dealing with compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
Imagine working in a shelter where not every animal gets that happy ending. It takes a toll.
Oh yeah, that's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So does RoleCatcher offer any advice for dealing with that? asking for a friend who cries at those ASPCA commercials.
They do. They really emphasize the importance of self-care, finding those healthy ways to process those tough emotions so you don't burn out. It's all about staying effective in the long run.
That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You need to be mentally resilient to really give these animals your best.
Exactly. And that resilience actually ties into another big point they make continuous learning. This isn't a career where you just clock out mentally when you leave the kennel.
Always observing, always adapting.
Yeah.
So what kind of learning are we talking about here? Besides, becoming a VR expert for those monkeys we talked about earlier.
Well, certifications are a big one. It's like leveling up your skills. Want to specialize in working with birds of prey? There's a certification for that.
So it's not enough to just love hawks.
Yeah.
You got to be a certified hawk whisperer.
Exactly. And that kind of specialized knowledge can open doors to some pretty cool opportunities. In fact, RoleCatcher mentions that some animal handlers even get involved in filmmaking.
Wait, seriously? Like training those Hollywood chimps? I always thought that was more of an urban legend.
Nope, it's a real thing. Think documentaries, nature shows, even commercials. Someone's going to make sure those animal actors are safe and well treated on set.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool.
Sure.
Although I'm guessing it's not always as glamorous as it sounds.
Probably not. The guide emphasizes that even with those really unique jobs, the core of being an animal handler remains the same. It's about being an advocate for the animals, making sure their needs come first.
So whether you're scooping poop at a local shelter or teaching dolphins tricks on a movie set, it all comes back to that human-animal connection.
Exactly. And according to RoleCatcher, that connection can have a much wider impact than people realize.
Really? Tell me more.
Well, they have this whole section on how animal handlers actually contribute to conservation efforts, things like breeding programs for endangered species, rehabilitating injured wildlife.
So it goes beyond just caring for individual animals. They're actually helping to protect entire populations.
Exactly. And it goes even further than that. The guide talks about how research done with animals, often with animal handlers assisting, can actually lead to medical breakthroughs that help humans.
Wow, I never even thought about it that way. So it's not just about this love for animals, it's about the impact they can have on the world as a whole.
Precisely. And that brings us back to something we discussed earlier. Your question about whether this is even a future-proof career. Well, as long as people care about animals, as long as we need to understand them, there will be a need for skilled animal handlers.
That's good to hear. But with all this talk of conservation and impact and making a difference, it does sound like a lot to put on someone who's just exploring this as a career.
Oh, absolutely. And RoleCatcher acknowledges that too. They actually dedicate a good chunk of the guide to the practical stuff like salary expectations, educational paths, the nuts and bolts.
Okay, so let's talk numbers then. What can someone realistically expect to earn in this field?
They say the average salary for animal handlers in the U.S. ranges from about $25,000 to $40,000 per year.
All right, so not exactly getting rich quick,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing that can vary a lot based on experience, location, all that.
Oh, definitely. They're very clear that those figures are just a starting point. Like we said, specialization is key. Someone with advanced training like a certified dog behaviorist will command a much higher rate.
All right, got to get those credentials. What about location? Big city versus small town, any difference there?
For sure. Urban areas with lots of pet owners tend to have way more opportunities, and that usually means better pay.
Makes sense. So you're saying if I want to get rich as a dog walker, I need to move to New York City?
Well, not necessarily just dog walking, but the guide does point out that those in higher level roles, like maybe leading a team at a prestigious zoo, those folks can earn significantly more.
Okay, so there's definitely a career ladder to climb here, with real potential to grow. What about the education side of things? What does that look like?
They have a whole breakdown of the different educational pathways. A high school diploma might be enough for some entry-level positions, but most employers are going to want at least an associate's degree in a related field.
So hitting the books is important if you want to move up in this field.
It definitely gives you a leg up. They even mention that a bachelor's or even a master's degree can be a real asset, especially for those interested in really specialized roles like, animal behavior or conservation.
So there's definitely a path for those who want to make this a lifelong pursuit. Constantly learning, expanding their knowledge.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher is very clear that it's not all about formal education. Real-world experience is just as important, if not more so.
Right, because who are you going to trust more with a terrified cat? The person who aced their animal anatomy exam, or the one who spent hundreds of hours volunteering at this shelter?
Exactly. The guide is full of stories from these seasoned animal handlers who all say the same thing. volunteer intern, get your hands dirty. That's where the real learning happens.
It's all about proving you can handle the day-to-day. The
Okay.
good, the bad, and the just plain smelly.
Exactly. And those hands-on experiences often lead to really valuable networking opportunities. You never know who you might meet while you're cleaning out those cages. Could be your future employer.
That's so true. It's all about building those connections, proving you're passionate and dedicated. But speaking of passion, the guide doesn't shy away from the not-so-fun parts of this job, does it?
Not at all. They're very upfront about the physical demands, the emotional toll, even the potential dangers. Remember, we're talking about working with animals here. They have their own instincts, and those instincts can be unpredictable.
Right, it's not all cuddles and treats.
Yeah.
So paint us a picture of those tougher aspects. What kind of challenges should someone be prepared for?
Well, physically, you're going to be on your feet a lot, lifting heavy stuff and potentially dealing with some large or strong animals. They actually tell the story about an experienced handler who got a nasty kick from a horse, even though she was following all the safety protocols.
Ouch. I bet that left a mark.
It did. It's a good reminder that accidents can and do happen, even to the most seasoned professionals.
So a healthy dose of caution and respect for those animal instincts is crucial.
Absolutely. And then there's the emotional side. We already talked about compassion fatigue, but the guide also gets into the stress of having to make really tough decisions, like when it comes to things like euthanasia.
Oh gosh, yeah. That must be incredibly difficult. Heartbreaking even.
It is, and it's not something you can just brush off. The guide stresses how important it is to have a good support system in place, whether it's colleagues, friends, or family. Having people to talk to who get it can make all the difference.
It's definitely not a career for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
But for the right person, someone who's truly dedicated and resilient, it sounds incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely. And that sense of reward, that feeling of making a real difference in the lives of animals, that's something that comes up again and again in the guide.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? The animals.
Exactly. It's about advocating for their well-being, protecting them, understanding them, and appreciating that unique bond we share with them.
And that bond, as we've learned today, can have a ripple effect impacting not just the animals themselves, but the world around them. It's amazing how much depth there is to this career path. And it seems like the learning never really stops, does it?
Not if you're doing it right. And RoleCatcher actually ends the guide on a thought that really stuck with me. They talk about how the future of animal care depends on us kind of shifting our mindset. Oh, interesting. Okay, so after we've already talked about robots and high-tech training and everything, what kind of shift are they talking about?
Well, they pose this question. What if, instead of just reacting to problems, animal handlers were more focused on preventing them in the first place?
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So like preventative care.
Exactly. They argue that the deeper our understanding of animal behavior becomes, the better equipped we are to create environments where they can not only survive, but actually thrive.
So it's not just about treating an illness after it pops up. It's about figuring out why it happened and maybe preventing it altogether.
Right. Like if a zoo animal seems stressed all the time, maybe the answer isn't just medication. Maybe the enclosure itself needs to be redesigned.
That makes a lot of sense.
They actually use this phrase, proactive advocacy, in the guide. And it's basically about animal handlers using their expertise to speak up for the animals, even when it means challenging the way things have always been done. That's pretty powerful stuff. So you're not just an employee. You're an advocate for the animals constantly pushing for better conditions, better understanding.
Exactly. And they even give a few examples, like some animal handlers are starting to use their knowledge to influence things like public policy.
Really? Like how?
Well, they could testify about animal welfare laws or consult on urban planning projects to make sure they're taking wildlife into account.
Wow. So they're not just working with animals, they're actually shaping how the world interacts with animals in general.
Exactly. And honestly, that's what I think makes this career path so amazing. It's not just a job. It's a chance to be part of something much bigger to really make a difference.
I think you've definitely convinced me that this is way more than just a job. So for anyone listening who's feeling totally fired up about this right now, what's like the most important thing they should take away from all of this?
I'd say this. You got to have that deep love for animals. That's your fuel, but knowledge, that's your compass. Never stop learning, never stop questioning, and never underestimate the impact you can have.
I love that. It's about combining your passion with expertise and never forgetting that you have a voice and you can use it to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves.
Exactly. And you know, even if you decide that a hands-on career with animals isn't the right fit for you, There's still tons of ways to support animal welfare in your own life.
So true. Every little bit of awareness, every act of kindness makes a difference.
Well, it's been great being here for this deep dive.
The pleasure was all ours. And to everyone listening, we hope you've enjoyed this journey into the world of animal handlers.
Yeah.
Remember, every adventure starts with a single step, or maybe in this case, a gentle scratch behind the ears. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.